Good evening. Accident and emergency departments in England have recorded their worst performance since current records began in 2004. 1 in 6 patients waited longer than the 4-hour target in October, and the target for starting cancer treatment was missed for the 46th month in a row. The total number of people waiting for routine operations is now nearly 4.5 million. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn described the figures as disgraceful and blamed the problems on a lack of staff and funding. But the Prime Minister said they were a result of the huge demand being placed on the National Health Service. Here's our Health Editor Hugh Pym.
That was when I thought, right, OK, something's not right.
Donald, who was 84, died after sliding off a hospital trolley. He'd been waiting 6 hours in A&E.
From 8:15 up until the time he died, nobody came to see him. No pain relief was offered.
His daughter, who's a former nurse, said he might still be alive if calls for help had been acted on.
I can appreciate how busy nurses are, how busy A&E can get. However, come sort of 10, half 10, when I was speaking to nurses and a doctor to say that my dad needs to be seen, and I wasn't listened to, I was very angry.
The hospital said it offered sincere sympathies to Donald's family and was investigating the matter thoroughly. The NHS in England is under intense pressure as patient numbers rise year by year. From 2012, the 95% target for up to 4 hours in A&E was being hit, but from 2015 it started declining to its lowest last month. For routine surgery, 92% of patients should be treated within 18 weeks, and that hasn't been hit for nearly 4 years. Boris Johnson was challenged on the declining performance of the NHS.
This is basically caused by the huge demand that there is on the NHS, and that's why now, in the last 3 months, we have done the biggest investment in the NHS in modern times.
As it happens, the last Labour government increased spending on health in some years more than the Conservatives now plan. Today, Labour and the Lib Dems attacked the government's record.
The worst performance ever in our A&E departments. I mean, so many patients will be languishing on trolleys, waiting longer and longer and longer for treatment and care in our overcrowded hospitals. I mean, this comes after a decade of cuts in our health services.
I'm appalled by these figures today. They are the worst figures on record. It's devastating for patients that need help and support and treatment. It's devastating for those people that work in our health service.
In England, 83.6% of patients were treated or assessed in A&E within 4 hours in October. For the rest of the UK, the latest figures are for September. In Scotland, the level was 89.3% in that month. In Wales, the number was lower at 75%. In Northern Ireland, just 59.6% were treated or assessed in 4 hours in major A&E units. There were similar pressures on health services across the UK. They're illustrated by the experience of Jill, aged 88, who has dementia. She was on a trolley in A&E for 6 hours, and her family say they witnessed severe stress in the hospital.
It was bedlam. There was trolleys in the corridors, there was trolleys in doorways. They were bringing trolleys in, they were moving your trolley and pushing you further and further and further that way, fitting 2 more people in that way. If they were moving a trolley, they had to move trolleys out of the way to get trolleys by. You're not being neglected, but you feel like you're being neglected.
Her family say Jill should never have been sent to A&E and she was let down by local community care. The hospitals apologised but said a significant increase in the number of very poorly patients meant services were under considerable pressure.
Well, Hugh is with me now, and these figures were from September and October, before winter had even set in. There must be real fears about how the NHS is going to cope this winter.
Yes, Sophie, we haven't even got to the flu season and seriously cold weather. I should say more patients are being treated year on year. Staff are working really hard, doing their best, just can't hit those targets. A couple of things haven't come across yet in this election debate. First of all, how much money is really needed by the NHS to cope with future demand and invest in transforming care in local communities so people don't, where possible, end up in hospital? And what about workforce? Where are the future doctors and nurses and other health staff going to come from when there are thousands of vacancies? There's one particular problem right now over pensions and tax, which mean that senior doctors often don't want to do extra shifts to help bring down waiting times because all the extra money goes in tax. That's a real headache for employers and the NHS right now.
Hugh Pym, thank you. The Conservatives say they will seek to control immigration by introducing a points-based system that will be firm but fair if they win the election. But the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, did not set a specific target for reducing overall numbers. The Prime Minister said immigration could come down in some sectors, but he didn't want the UK to be closed to the rest of the world. Here's our Home Editor, Mark Easton.
People have called Lowestoft home since the Stone Age. Its name from the Old Norse means homestead, but not enough people want to come and live here these days. If Lowestoft has an immigration problem, it's not that there are too many migrants coming to the town, but too few. The national immigration figures explain the problem. Since the Brexit referendum in 2016, net migration into the UK has fallen, still historically high, but down 20%. Within that change is a more dramatic shift. Net migration from outside the EU has gone up 21%. But from inside the European Union, it's down by more than 2/3 in just 3 years. That huge fall in overall EU migration to the UK has seen some sectors that have relied on European workers struggling to adapt. In this part of the world, that's led to insurmountable recruitment problems.
Kind of being at the end of the line and at the edge of everything. We don't have people that just pass through. We don't have.
As chief executive of a community trust in Lowestoft, Emma Ratzer knows how desperate staff shortages can be for the town's most vulnerable citizens.
We don't have much immigration out here, which will be, good news to hear for lots of people. But actually, in terms of finding people to fill social worker posts, GP posts, teaching jobs, it's actually a real problem for us.
Health is a significant concern. There have been moves to bring in GPs from abroad. Care homes are closing. There aren't enough willing people locally to fill the vacancies. And it's that problem that lies behind confusion today as to what a Conservative government would do about immigration. A statement from party headquarters this morning quoted the Home Secretary saying, "We will reduce immigration overall." But by this afternoon, she couldn't say whether it should go down or up.
The Conservative Party wants to control immigration.
I'll ask you again, do you want immigration to go up or down?
Well, we will be controlling immigration.
But does that mean it goes down?
Well, we will be able to control immigration numbers.
Do you want to reduce the numbers of immigrants who come to this country?
Well, we want immigration that is fair.
The suggestion is you want to lower immigration, is that right?
Well, we will be able to control who comes to our country and also the reasons as to why people are coming here.
In Middlesbrough on Teesside, one can find the other side of the argument, that migrants put extra pressure on public services. Local children recently couldn't access school places in the town because of unexpected foreign arrivals.
Well, I think they do need to bring down the population. We haven't got enough spaces.
I just think when it's concentrated and stuff like that, I think it becomes an impact on the fabric of the town.
All the parties give you all the spiel, what they're going to do, what they're not going to do, and then at the end of the day you don't see any difference with any of them.
It's the different experiences of places like Middlesbrough and Lowestoft that explain why the parties won't be clear about immigration. Labour's talked of extending free movement. The Liberal Democrats want a system that works for the economy, and the SNP wants more immigration for Scotland. But in truth, Britain still doesn't know what controlling our borders should look like. Mark Easton, BBC News, Lowestoft.
The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has refused to say whether he would want to increase or decrease immigration if he became Prime Minister, but he has hinted that Labour would make it easier for families to bring relatives to live in the UK from overseas and for foreign workers to come to the UK to fill skills shortages. He was talking to our political editor Laura Kuenssberg as part of a series of interviews with party leaders.
Would you like to see immigration go up or down?
I want to see immigration being fair, and we'll see what the outcome of that is. But the principle has to be that there are many families in Britain that want to bring relatives here, and families should have a chance to live together but can't because of the income levels they're required to do. And also, we have to be realistic that in this country we're not training enough people. So there's going to be immigration in the future.
As a point of principle, would you be happy if it went up, or would you rather see it go down?
I want people to be able to be reunited with their families, and I want British people to be able to work across Europe as they are at the present time. And I think putting arbitrary figures on it, as successive governments have done, simply doesn't work.
You don't have a strong view on whether immigration should be higher or lower?
I want our system to be decent, to be fair, and our services to be properly run and properly staffed.
Now, in September, your party voted to extend freedom of movement. Some of your biggest backers, including the leader of the Unite Union, Len McCluskey, think that isn't manageable. What do you think?
Well, the conference motion was passed. It doesn't necessarily form part of the manifesto, but I do think we have to recognise there are many people in Britain who have partners who are from Europe or the other way around and have children who are therefore the children of both. We cannot stop them moving about.
But your manifesto in 2017 said that you would end freedom of movement. It sounds like your manifesto in 2019 will say something very different.
We are meeting this weekend to decide the contents of our manifesto, and that will come to a decision.
The 2017 manifesto also said Labour accepts the referendum result. Now you are offering people another referendum. Doesn't your change of heart on Brexit undermine people's trust?
I think what we've done is a sensible approach. I recognise why people voted Remain and why people voted Leave.
But don't you think there will be some people listening to you now who might have voted Labour in 2017 who think, hang on a minute, you told me in 2017 that you accepted the referendum result, that it was done, and now this time you're saying it's not done. Now, doesn't that have consequences for people's trust in you?
We're doing everything to ensure that the trade relationship, the jobs and the rights that are accompanied by EU membership are retained in the future, and that those very large numbers of people that demanded a referendum have also got the opportunity to make their views known in a final say on it.
Labour also used to say, though, there couldn't be another referendum in Scotland. Now you say, perhaps there might be. Isn't that again a question of trust?
No, it's a question of realism. The question is, Scotland has poverty, has bad housing, has a need for infrastructure investment.
Labour's position was, in the last general election, there would not be another Scottish independence referendum. That's a promise you gave to Scottish voters.
There is no priority to have a Scottish referendum, independence referendum. We want the early years of the Labour government to be completely dominated by the investment that we will put into Scotland.
You've also said in the last couple of years, though, that you were doing everything you can to stamp out anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And yet in this election, your party has selected candidates who have been found to have expressed some anti-Semitic views. I mean, again, isn't this a question of trust?
I have introduced very strong procedures into the party. We go through it, we go through due diligence on candidates, and where there are questions, they are brought before a group to answer those questions, and then decisions are made. In some cases, candidates are removed.
What would you say, though, to voters listening to you today who are just not sure who to trust in this election? And they're not sure if they can really trust you, whether on Brexit, anti-Semitism, or where the party is on immigration?
We have an opportunity here to elect a government that will end austerity. We have an opportunity here to elect a government that will invest in the future of this country. An opportunity to elect a government that will start to redress the gross levels of income inequality across Britain.
And if your determination gets you to number 10, will you live above the shop? Will you move into Downing Street?
Well, I will do whatever's necessary to ensure there's efficient government of this country. Yes, of course.
Jeremy Corbyn, thank you very much indeed.
There is an ongoing debate within the Labour Party over whether it should campaign during the election for greater freedom of movement. The General Secretary of the Unite Union, Len McCluskey, says there must be certain conditions if Labour is to extend the right of citizens to work across the EU. Our political correspondent Iain Watson reports.
Just wondering whether we're going to be able to count on your votes. We're going to do this side of the road.
Don't vote for a slogan, vote for a policy.
Labour activists in this Remain voting area of Yorkshire want to sell a message that they can really believe in.
Yeah, the gentleman there was very positive.
At Labour conference this year, members voted to defend and extend freedom of movement, the right of European citizens to work and seek work in the UK.
Don't really care.
The party's grassroots are now pushing for this to become a fully fledged manifesto commitment for government.
The idea for me having closed borders and not having that freedom of movement is really a terrible one, to be honest.
I don't know how it would go down on the doorstep, but I think it's important to stand up for the values that you believe in.
But some senior figures have been worried about how this will go down, especially in leave areas.
If you can tell people they'll have
The influential leader of the biggest Labour-supporting union told me new policies to protect workers could make freedom of movement more acceptable.
Labour's policy will be to protect all workers, migrant workers as well as local and British workers. That is Labour's policy. It will be done with labour market regulations. It won't stop the free movement of labour. It will effectively make certain that greedy bosses, agency companies are not abusing working people.
Could you possibly get them all bundled?
But Labour has wider tensions on Brexit. The leadership have set out a route map towards a new referendum and won't officially say if they'll back Leave or Remain until after the election. But more than 120 Labour candidates have signed a pledge making it clear they'll be campaigning to Remain. But more than that, many in the campaign literature are also saying it would be their top priority. And one shadow minister has even suggested that a vote for her is a vote to remain in the European Union.
Labour is not a Remain party. Labour is a party that speaks for the whole of the nation and wants to put a proper deal back to the people. Principled and honourable thing to do. We have to get that message across in the Leave areas.
The task for Labour when it draws up its manifesto is how to appeal both to voters and to its members on issues which have divided the country. Iain Watson, BBC News.
Our political editor Laura Kuenssberg joins us now. And Labour have a big policy announcement tonight. Free broadband for all, they say, and part nationalisation of BT if they win the election.
That's right, Sophie. This is radical stuff. We've been speaking to the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, who would be in charge of the nation's purse strings if Labour are lucky enough to win the election. And they're making a big offer to the public tonight to offer free broadband for every household in the country, whether a millionaire or a hard-up family. They do that by nationalising part of British Telecom and by putting a tax on the big internet companies. Now, the Labour Party thinks that this is a big, bold offer that may well prove popular with millions of voters, but it could well be very controversial too. There are questions about its credibility and, of course, who would really pick up the tab. And a reminder, if any really was needed, that although both of the main parties are promising to spend more on public services in this election, that there is fundamentally a dramatic difference of opinion between the Conservatives and the Labour Party on how big the role of the state should be and how much they should get involved in the markets. But for the Labour Party, I think no question in this campaign so far, this is the boldest promise yet that they are making to the public.
Laura, thank you. Well, our business editor Simon Jack joins me now, and you've just been speaking to the boss of BT. Has this come as something of a surprise?
I think yes. I mean, as recently as July of this year, John McDonnell said that BT was not on its list of companies to be nationalised. They also dispute the £20 billion figure Labour is saying that it would cost to roll out full fibre to the whole country. They say it would be closer to £40 billion. And they also say if you're going to give it away for free, you're spending up to £40 billion on an asset without getting the income, about £5 billion a year that broadband brings in. And also, what's that going to do? If BT are going to give it away for free, what does that do to the likes of Virgin Media, TalkTalk, Sky and the like? They also say that they would nationalise it by buying bits of it at a price that Parliament decides. And it's very unlikely that Parliament are going to decide to pay above market value. It could well be quite a steep discount. And that could mean a hit to millions of savers, millions of whom own BT shares through their pension fund. And I think one of the last things to think about is if you look at the share price of BT tomorrow, it will be very interesting because they weren't on the list for nationalisation. Now they are on the list for part nationalisation. You're going to get a very clear view of what the market considers the chances of a Corbyn government are by how that share price reacts tomorrow.
Simon Jack, thank you.